The last thing I remember was the sound of shattering glass and the taste of blood in my mouth. David's fist connecting with my jaw, Jessica screaming in the background, and the sickening crack as my head hit the marble steps of our family estate. My own brother had killed me over a woman who was never worth either of our lives. But here's the thing about death sometimes. It gives you exactly what you need. Perspective. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting in the passenger seat of my silver BMW, staring at the invitation in my hands. Gold lettering on cream paper. Marcus, Chen, and Jessica. Lou. Request the pleasure of your company at their engagement celebration. The date read June 15th, 2024. My heart nearly stopped. This was impossible. I had died on June 14th, 2025, exactly 1 year after this engagement party. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands. The screen displayed June 10th, 2024, 2:47 p.m., 5 days before the engagement party that would set everything in motion. 5 days before I would make the biggest mistake of my life by trusting the two people who would destroy me. But this time I knew exactly what was coming. This time, I would be ready. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in the parking lot of Chen Industries, our family's import business that my grandfather had built from nothing. In my original timeline, I had just finished presenting our quarterly expansion plans to the board. Feeling proud and accomplished, I had no idea that in exactly 1 year, I'd be dead on the steps of the place I called home, killed by the very brother I'd spent my life protecting and supporting. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Baby, don't forget we're meeting the wedding planner at 4 p.m. I have such exciting ideas for the ceremony. The heart emoji at the end made my stomach turn. In my previous life, I had thought that message was sweet. Now, knowing what I knew, it felt like poison disguised as sugar. I closed my eyes and let the memories of that final year wash over me. The subtle changes in Jessica's behavior, the way she started staying late at yoga classes that never seemed to make her more flexible. The mysterious phone calls she'd take in the bathroom, always claiming it was her sister Victoria needing relationship advice. David's sudden interest in our engagement plans, volunteering to handle details that seemed beneath his usual interests. The way they'd exchange glances across family dinners, quick looks they thought no one noticed. But I had noticed. Even then, some part of me had sensed something was wrong. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. I had loved Jessica Lou since our Stanford days, when she was just a brilliant economics student with dreams bigger than her modest upbringing. I had loved David because he was my little brother, the one I'd protected from our father's impossible expectations, the one I'd helped through his messy divorce from Elena just 2 years earlier. Elena Rodriguez. Even thinking her name brought a complex mix of emotions I hadn't expected. In my original timeline, I had watched from the sidelines as David systematically destroyed his marriage to one of the most remarkable women I'd ever met. Elena, with her passion for art and her infectious laugh, her way of making everyone around her feel seen and valued. David had treated her like an accessory, something beautiful to display at family functions but ignore at home. When their marriage imploded over his gambling debts and constant lies, I had felt genuinely sorry for her. She deserved so much better. What I hadn't realized until much later was that Elena had feelings for me. It was something she'd confessed to Sophie Martinez, her best friend, during one of those wine-fueled conversations women have when life gets too heavy. Sophie had let it slip at David's funeral. Yes, David had died too, just 3 months after me. From a drug overdose that everyone whispered was intentional, apparently killing his own brother had broken something inside him that even Jessica's love couldn't fix. Standing in that cemetery, listening to Sophie tell me through tears that Elena had always wondered what might have been different if she'd met me first, had been one of the most painful moments of my shortened life. By then, Elena had moved to Portland, started over with a small art gallery, and refused to have anything to do with the Chen family name. I couldn't blame her. But now, sitting in this car with a second chance, literally in my hands, everything looked different. I wasn't the naive man who believed in fairy tales and forever promises anymore. I had died once, learned the hard truth about loyalty and love, and been given an impossible gift. Question was, what was I going to do with it? My first instinct had been revenge. Simple, straightforward, satisfying revenge. Expose Jessica and David before they could humiliate me. Present evidence of their affair at the engagement party, watch their faces crumble, and enjoy the chaos. But as I sat there, really thinking it through, I realized that was exactly what the old Marcus would have done. The old Marcus who fought with his heart instead of his head, who made emotional decisions that led to emotional consequences. This Marcus, the one who had experienced death and rebirth, who had learned that love without respect is just beautiful packaging around an empty box, had a better idea. A smarter idea. It's an idea that would give me everything I actually wanted while letting David and Jessica think they were getting exactly what they'd schemed for. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Elena's number. In my original timeline, I had deleted it after David's funeral. It's a painful reminder of all the what-ifs and might-have-beens. But here, in this reset world, it was still there. Elena Rodriguez, with the little paintbrush emoji David had added as a joke during happier times in their marriage. My finger hovered over the call button. Elena would be surprised to hear from me. In this timeline, we had barely spoken since her divorce from David 8 months ago. Our interactions had been limited to polite nods at family gatherings and carefully neutral conversations about safe topics like the weather or San Francisco traffic. But I knew things about Elena now that I hadn't known before. I knew she kept a journal where she wrote letters to people she'd never send. I knew she donated anonymously to 3 different children's charities every Christmas. I knew she still wore the small silver bracelet her grandmother had given her, even though David had always said it looked cheap against her other jewelry. Most importantly, I knew she had wondered about me. And in this new timeline, I was going to make sure she didn't have to wonder anymore. I dialed her number before I could lose my nerve. It rang twice before her familiar voice answered, cautious but warm. Marcus, is everything okay? It's been so long since you called. Hi, Elena, I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. I know this might seem strange, but I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee sometime. There are some things I'd like to talk to you about, things I should have said a long time ago. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her mind working, trying to figure out what this could possibly be about. Finally, she said, of course, I'd like that. When were you thinking? Tomorrow, I said without hesitation. There's this little place in Pacific Heights, Moonbeam Caf, do you know it? I know it well, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It's actually one of my favorite spots in the city. How about 3 p.m.? Perfect, I said. Elena, thank you for saying yes, I know things have been complicated with the family and everything. Marcus, she said softly, you were never the complication. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up the phone. I felt something I hadn't experienced in either timeline, genuine hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone trying to save a doomed relationship, but the quiet confidence of someone who finally knew exactly what they wanted and had a real plan to get it. Jessica texted again. Where are you? The wedding planner is waiting. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Running late. Start without me. I trust your judgment completely. If she only knew how true that statement was. I trusted her judgment to be exactly as selfish and short-sighted as it had been the first time around. The difference was, this time, I was counting on it. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp San Francisco air that usually made me feel optimistic about life. Today, it felt like freedom. I had slept better than I had in months, maybe because, for the first time in either timeline, I wasn't carrying the weight of other people's lies on my shoulders. I was done being the good son, the loyal brother, the devoted fiancé who turned blind eyes to obvious red flags because confronting them felt too uncomfortable. I dressed carefully for my meeting with Elena, choosing a navy cashmere sweater instead of my usual business suits. In my previous life, I had always been Marcus the investment banker, Marcus the responsible eldest son, Marcus the man who lived up to everyone else's expectations. Today, I wanted to be just Marcus, the person Elena might actually want to know. Moonbeam Calf sat tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower shop on Fillmore Street, the kind of hidden gem that locals guarded jealously from tourists. I had discovered it during my Stanford days, back when Jessica and I would drive into the city for weekend adventures. The irony of meeting Elena there wasn't lost on me, but it felt appropriate somehow. New memories could be built on the foundations of old ones, especially when the old ones had turned toxic. Elena was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a ceramic mug wrapped between her hands. She wore a flowing emerald dress that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun that left a few rebellious strands framing her face. She looked exactly as I remembered her, but somehow more vivid, more present. Maybe death had sharpened my ability to see what was actually in front of me instead of what I expected to find. "You look good, Marcus," she said as I approached, and there was no artifice in her voice, no careful politeness, just genuine warmth, different somehow, more relaxed. I slid into the chair across from her, ordering a black coffee from the server who appeared with the efficiency of someone who loved their job. "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I've been walking around in someone else's life and finally remembered who I actually am." Elena tilted her head slightly, studying my face with the artist's eye that had always made David uncomfortable. He had never liked being truly seen, preferring the surface-level admiration that came from his charm and good looks. It's an interesting way to put it. What brought on this personal revelation? I had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head, but sitting across from Elena, feeling the genuine curiosity in her attention, the prepared words felt inadequate. How do you tell someone that you died and came back without sounding completely insane? How do you explain that you called them because in another timeline, you learned they had feelings for you without revealing information you shouldn't possibly possess? Do you ever feel like you're living your life for other people? I asked instead. Like every decision you make is filtered through what your family expects, what society demands, what looks good from the outside. Lena's laugh was soft, but knowing. "Marcus, I was married to your brother for 3 years. I lived every single day trying to be the wife he wanted. The daughter-in-law your parents approved of. The woman who looked perfect at family gatherings and charity events. I know exactly what you mean. What changed for you?" I leaned forward, genuinely curious. In my original timeline, I had never asked Elena about her divorce, respecting what I thought was appropriate distance. Now I realized that distance had been cowardice disguised as courtesy. I realized that trying to be perfect for someone who doesn't actually see you is the loneliest way to live, she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. David wanted a beautiful accessory, not a partner. He wanted someone who would smile at his jokes, laugh at his stories, and never challenge him or expect him to grow. When I finally understood that, staying became impossible. The honesty in her voice hit me like a physical force. This was what I had been missing in my relationship. With Jessica, this willingness to speak truth even when it was uncomfortable. Jessica and I had perfected the art of surface-level harmony, never digging deep enough to discover whether we actually liked each other as people or just loved the idea of being in love. "Getting married in 5 days," I said, the words coming out more abruptly than I had planned. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "I know. Jessica showed me her ring at the charity gala last month. It's beautiful. Your grandmother's jade setting, right? You have a good memory?" I paused, watching her face. "Are you happy for me?" The question hung between us like a challenge. Elena set down her mug and looked directly at me, her gaze steady and unflinching. "Do you want me to be honest or polite?" "Honest." "Always honest? Then no, I'm not happy for you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Not because I wish you ill, but because I don't think Jessica sees you any more clearly than David saw me. I think she sees Marcus Chen, heir to Chen Industries, stable provider, acceptable husband. I'm not sure she sees the man who calls old friends out of nowhere because he's having an existential crisis about living authentically. Her words should have stung, but instead they felt like relief. Someone finally saw what I had been too afraid to acknowledge. You think I'm making a mistake? I think you're asking the wrong person, Elena said carefully. I'm your brother's ex-wife. My opinion on your romantic choices is hardly objective. What if I told you I wanted your opinion specifically because you're David's ex-wife? I asked. What if I told you that watching how he treated you taught me more about what I don't want in a marriage than anything else ever has? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her artist's hand still wrapped around her mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Marcus, what is this really about? You didn't call me for coffee to discuss your pre-wedding jitters. She was right, of course. Elena had always been perceptive, one of the qualities that had made David nervous around her. People who saw clearly were dangerous to people who preferred to live in comfortable illusions. What if I told you that I've been thinking about you? I said, throwing caution aside completely. What if I told you that over the past few months, every time I've seen you at family events, I've wondered what would have happened if we had met first? The color rose in Elena's cheeks, but she didn't look away. I would say that's a dangerous thing for an engaged man to admit. I would say that maybe some dangerous admissions are worth making. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged full of possibility and the kind of tension that comes when two people finally stop pretending they don't feel what they feel. Elena's eyes searched my face, looking for something I hoped she would find. Marcus, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. If you're having second thoughts about Jessica, you need to figure that out before you walk down the aisle, not after. And definitely not by using me as some kind of escape route from a life you're not sure you want. What if you're not an escape route? I asked. What if you're the destination I was too stupid to recognize the first time around? Lena's breath caught slightly, and I saw her hands tighten around her mug. The first time around, I had slipped, letting my knowledge of the other timeline color my words. But looking at Elena's face, seeing the hope and confusion and possibility there, I realized that maybe complete honesty was the only way forward. It's not about the rebirth, not about dying and coming back, but about feelings that had been buried. Under family expectations and convenient timing, the first time I really looked at you, I said, recovering, really saw you instead of just seeing David's wife. It was at Christmas dinner 2 years ago. You were helping Mom in the kitchen, and David was in the living room talking loudly about some business deal, ignoring you completely. You were laughing with Mom about something, and I remember thinking that you had the most genuine laugh I'd ever heard. I wondered what it would be like to be the person who made you laugh like that. Elena's eyes had gone wide, and I could see her processing this information, trying to reconcile it with the timeline she thought she knew. 2 years ago? Marcus, that was before David and I separated. Before Jessica. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, feeling the warmth of her skin and the slight tremor that ran through her fingers. I know it was complicated timing. I know it was wrong to have those thoughts when you were married. To my brother and I was supposedly committed to building something with Jessica. But having them and acting on them are different things. I never crossed any lines then, Elena, but I'm crossing them now. She stared down at our joined hands, and I could practically see her mind working, trying to process what I was telling her. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Marcus, I can't be the reason you call off your wedding. I won't be responsible for that kind of chaos in your family. You're not the reason, I said firmly. Jessica is the reason. David is the reason. The fact that I've been living someone else's version of my life is the reason. You're just the first person who's made me remember who I actually am underneath all the expectations. Elena pulled her hand free from mine, but gently, without rejection. If that's true, then you need to handle your situation with Jessica first, before anything else happens between us. Because Elena Rodriguez doesn't play second fiddle to anyone anymore. And she definitely doesn't get involved with engaged men, no matter how compelling their existential crises might be. The strength in her voice, the clear boundaries she was setting, only made me want her more. This was what I had been missing with Jessica. This sense of being with someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't compromise it for anyone. You're right, I said. Jessica deserves honesty, even if she hasn't been giving it to me. What do you mean by that? I had said too much again, letting my knowledge of her affair slip into the conversation. But Elena was watching me with those perceptive eyes, and I realized that maybe she had already seen more than I had given her credit for. "Have you noticed anything different about Jessica lately?" I asked instead of answering directly. "Anything that struck you as odd?" Elena was quiet for a moment, clearly debating whether to share what she had observed. Finally, she said, "She's been asking a lot of questions about David, about how he's doing since our divorce, whether he's dating anyone, that sort of thing. I assumed she was just being polite, but now that you mention it, her interest did seem unusually intense." So Elena had noticed. She was too smart and too observant to have missed the signs completely. The question was whether she had put the pieces together yet, or if she was giving Jessica the benefit of the doubt the way I had for too long. "Lena," I said, my voice more serious than it had been all afternoon. "If I told you that Jessica and David have been seeing each other, would you be surprised?" The look that crossed her face told me everything I needed to know. Surprise, yes, but not shock. Disappointment, but not devastation. She had suspected something, even if she hadn't wanted to believe it. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Longer than I should have let it continue," I admitted. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The engagement. Party was everything Jessica had dreamed of, and everything I had learned to dread. The Chen family estate in Hillsborough sprawled across 3 acres of manicured gardens. And tonight it glittered with string lights and the kind of understated elegance that whispered rather than shouted about old money. 200 guests mingled on the terrace overlooking the bay, sipping champagne and making the sort of polite conversation that would be forgotten by morning. I stood near the marble fountain in the center of the garden, watching Jessica work. The crowd with the skill of someone born for this kind of performance. She wore a flowing white dress that caught the evening breeze perfectly. Her black hair swept up in an elegant chignon that showed off the diamond earrings my mother had given her as a welcome to the family gift. Every gesture was calculated, every smile precisely calibrated for maximum effect. In my previous timeline, I had found her social grace admirable. Now it looked like exactly what it was, a carefully rehearsed act. David approached from the direction of the bar, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hands and that easy smile that had charmed teachers, girlfriends, and business partners his entire life. He looked relaxed, confident, completely at ease in his role as supportive younger brother. If I hadn't died because of his betrayal, I might have found his performance convincing. "Congratulations, big brother," he said, handing me one of the glasses. "Jessica looks absolutely radiant tonight. You're a lucky man." "Lucky," I repeated, accepting the drink but not tasting it. That's an interesting choice of words. David's smile flickered slightly, but recovered so quickly that someone without my knowledge might have missed it entirely. "Well, what else? Would you call it? Beautiful fiancée, successful business, loving family? You've got everything a man could want." "Almost everything," I said, watching his face carefully. "There's always something missing, isn't there? Something that belongs to someone else but looks so appealing from a distance." The color drained from David's face, and his grip tightened around his glass. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" "Oh, nothing specific," I said with a casual shrug. "Just thinking about human nature. It's the way people always want what they can't have. The way forbidden fruit always tastes sweeter than what's freely offered." David was staring at me now with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or guilt finally coming to the surface after months of careful concealment. "Are you feeling all right? You're talking in riddles, am I?" I took a sip of the whiskey, enjoying the burn as it went down. "I was just thinking about how strange it is that the people closest to us are often the ones who surprise us the most. Take Elena, for example. The mention of his ex-wife's name made David go completely still. What about Elena?" I had coffee. "With her yesterday," I said, watching his reaction with the fascination of someone observing a chemical experiment. Interesting conversation. She had some very insightful things to say about marriage, about honesty, about the difference between loving someone and actually seeing them. "Elena always was too philosophical for her own good," David said, but his voice had gone tight. "With something that might have been panic? What exactly did you two talk about? This and that? Old times? New possibilities?" Letting the silence stretch between us, and she mentioned that Jessica has been asking about You lately? Asking how you're doing, whether you're seeing anyone. Elena found it curious. All that interest in your personal life. David's hand was shaking now, just slightly, but enough that the whiskey in his glass rippled with each tremor. Jessica's just being polite. She's always been friendly. Friendly, I mused. Another interesting word choice. Tell me, David, in your experience, what's the difference between being friendly and being intimate? The glass slipped from David's fingers, shattering against the stone pathway and sending amber liquid spreading across the marble. Several nearby guests turned to look, their conversations pausing as they registered the sound of breaking glass. Clumsy of me, David said loudly, his voice artificially bright. Too much celebrating, I guess? A server appeared immediately with a towel and dustpan, efficiently cleaning up the mess, while David and I maintained eye contact like two predators sizing each other up. When the server finished and moved away, David leaned closer to me, his voice dropping to a whisper. Marcus, I don't know what you think you know, but I know exactly what I know, I interrupted. My voice equally quiet, but infinitely more dangerous. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before David could respond, Jessica appeared at my elbow like a vision in white silk. Her smile dazzling and her timing impeccable. She slipped her arm through mine with practiced ease. The perfect picture of the devoted fiancé. There you are, darling, she said. Her voice carrying just enough breathiness to suggest excitement and just enough volume to ensure nearby guests could hear. Your father wants to make the toast soon. We should probably gather everyone together. Of course, I said, covering her hand with mine and noting how. David's eyes tracked the gesture with something that looked like hunger. We wouldn't want to keep anyone waiting. Jessica's laugh was like silver bells, musical and completely artificial. You're so considerate. It's one of the things I love most about you. It's one of them, I repeated. How many things are there exactly? I'd love to hear the complete list sometime. The smile faltered for just a moment, confusion flickering across her features before the mask slipped back into place. Oh, Marcus, you're being silly. There are too many wonderful things about you two count. Try, I said, my voice still pleasant but with an edge that made both Jessica and David shift uncomfortably. Humor me. Name 5 specific things you love about me, not general categories like kindness or intelligence.
Ow.
Specific things. Personal things. Things that only someone who really knew me would notice. Jessica's mouth opened and closed. Like a fish out of water, her eyes darting to David as if looking for help. The silence stretched long enough that the guests nearest to us began to notice, their polite chatter dying away as they sensed drama in the making. Said, her voice higher than usual, You always remember my coffee order, and you never forget to water the plants in our apartment. And you have that adorable way of humming when you're concentrating on something difficult. Interesting, I said, noting that she had managed only 3 items instead of 5, and that 2 of them were about basic consideration rather than actual intimacy. David, what would you say? What specific things have you noticed about me over the years? David looked like he wanted to bolt, but with half the party now watching our little triangle, running wasn't an option. You're my brother, Marcus. Love everything about you. It's sweet, but not what I asked. Come on, David, you've known me your entire life. Surely you can think of something specific. Some habit or quirk or personal detail that makes me uniquely me? You bite your lower lip when you're nervous, David said suddenly, his voice strained. And you always check your phone twice before putting it away, like you're afraid you missed something important. And you have a scar on your left shoulder, from when you fell off your bike trying to teach me how to ride when we were kids. The accuracy of his observations hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were wrong, but because they were so completely right. David knew me better than my own fiancé did, understood my personal habits and history in a way that Jessica clearly didn't. The irony was devastating. The brother who was betraying me saw me more clearly than the woman I was planning to marry. Very good, I said, my voice steady, despite the emotion churning in my chest. It's amazing what people notice when they're actually paying attention. Jessica's face had gone pale, and I could see her finally beginning to understand that this wasn't just wedding jitters or pre-ceremony nerves. This was something else entirely. Something that threatened the carefully constructed world she had built around our engagement. Marcus, she said, her voice soft and uncertain. Maybe we should find somewhere private to talk. You seem upset about something? Do I? I looked around at the sea of faces watching our little drama unfold, many of them family friends who had known me since childhood, business associates who respected my judgment, society people who thrived on exactly this kind of gossip. I feel perfectly fine. In fact, I feel clearer than I have in months. My father appeared then, his imposing figure cutting through the crowd with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Robert Chen had built our family's fortune through careful planning and strategic thinking, and he had no patience for public displays of family discord. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command, "it's time for the toast." "Perfect timing, Dad," I said, raising my glass toward the assembled guests. "I have so much I want to say to everyone tonight." The look of alarm that passed between Jessica and David didn't escape my notice, but it was my father's expression that truly interested me. Robert Chen was a man who had survived business wars and family politics through careful observation and strategic patience. He was watching me now with the intensity of someone who sensed danger but couldn't yet identify its source. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the terrace with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate what promises to be a very memorable occasion." The crowd began to quiet, champagne glasses rising in anticipation of the traditional engagement toast. Jessica moved closer to my side, her arm tightening around mine in what looked like affection but felt like desperation. "5 days from now," I continued, "Jessica and I will be married in a ceremony that will unite not just to people, but to families, to histories, to futures that we believe are meant to be intertwined." Murmurs of approval rippled through the audience, the kind of satisfied sounds that accompanied all the expected social rituals. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, already emotional at the thought of her eldest son's wedding. "But tonight," I said, my voice rising slightly, "I want to talk about something even more important than marriage. I want to talk about truth." The murmurs died away completely. Jessica's fingernails dug into my arm through the fabric of my jacket, and I could feel David's eyes boring into me from across the small circle we had formed. "Truth is a funny thing," I continued, warming to my theme. "We tell ourselves that. We want it, that we value it, that it's the foundation of all meaningful relationships. But the reality is that most of us prefer comfortable lies to difficult truths. We choose the version of reality that makes us feel good about ourselves, even when we know deep down that we're living in a fantasy." "Marcus," my father said, his voice low and warning, "perhaps this isn't the time for philosophy." "But it is, Dad," I said, turning to face him directly. "When is it ever the right time to confront the lies we tell ourselves? Tomorrow? Next week? After the wedding? Or do we just keep pretending until the pretending becomes unbearable?" I could see understanding beginning to dawn in my father's eyes. The recognition that whatever was happening here was about more than pre-wedding nerves or philosophical musings. Robert Chen had not built a business empire by failing to read. The room, and right now, the room was charged with the kind of tension that preceded explosions. "The truth is," I said, turning back to address the entire party, "that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us most completely. Sometimes the love we think is real is just an elaborate performance. And sometimes the life we think we want is actually a prison we've built for ourselves out of other people's expectations." Jessica's grip on my arm had become painful, her fingernails probably leaving marks through the expensive fabric of my jacket. When I looked down at her, I saw naked fear in her eyes, the terror of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. "But here's what I've learned," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "The truth doesn't care whether we're ready for it or not, doesn't care whether it's convenient or comfortable or socially appropriate. The truth simply is, and eventually, it demands to be acknowledged." The silence that followed was absolute, 200 people holding their collective breath as they waited to see what would happen next. Even the hired musicians had stopped playing, sensing that whatever was unfolding was more dramatic than anything they could provide. "So here's my truth," I said, raising my glass one final time. "Jessica Liu is a remarkable woman who deserves to be with someone who sees her as clearly as she sees herself. and I have finally realized that person is not me. The gasps that rippled through the crowd sounded like wind through autumn leaves, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the evening air. Jessica's face went from pale to ghostly white, her grip on my arm loosening as if she had forgotten how to hold on to anything solid. David took an involuntary step backward, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. My father's expression shifted from confusion to fury in the space of a heartbeat. Robert Chen had not spent 30 years building a business, empire, and a social reputation to watch his eldest son destroy both in a single evening. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried the kind of controlled anger that was more terrifying than any shout. "Marcus," he said, each word precisely enunciated, "I think you need to step inside and collect yourself now." "Actually, Dad, I've never been more collected in my life," I replied, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly instead of just going through the motions of what everyone expects me to do." Jessica found her voice then, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Marcus, please, you're scaring me. This isn't like you at all, isn't it?" I turned to face her fully, noting how she flinched away from the intensity in my eyes. "Or maybe this is exactly like me, and you just never bothered to look closely enough to notice." The crowd had formed a loose circle around us now, no longer pretending to engage in polite conversation. This was better than any theater production. It's more compelling than any gossip they could have hoped to encounter at a simple engagement party. I could see phones being discreetly pulled from purses and pockets, the modern instinct to document drama overriding social courtesy. "You want to know what I've realized, Jessica?" he continued, my voice carrying easily across the terrace. "Realize that you don't love Marcus Chen the person. You love Marcus Chen the concept. The eldest son, the heir to Chen Industries, the socially acceptable husband who will give you the life you've always imagined for yourself." "That's not true," Jessica protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I love you. I've always loved." "You really? Then tell me about the book on my nightstand. The one I've been reading for the past 3 weeks. What's it called?" Jessica's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around desperately, as if the answer might be written somewhere in the faces of our guests. "You can't, can you?" Pressed on, "because you've never actually looked at it. You've walked past it dozens of times, but you've never been curious enough about my inner life to wonder what I might be thinking about in those quiet moments before sleep." "Marcus, this is ridiculous," David interjected, his voice tight with poorly concealed panic. "You're being unfair. Jessica loves you. Anyone can see that. Can they?" I swung around to face my brother, noting how he had positioned himself slightly behind Jessica, as if using her as a shield. "Tell me, David, since you're such an expert on Jessica's feelings, what exactly do you think she loves about me?" The trap was set so perfectly that David walked into it without even seeing the danger. "She loves your stability, your success, the way you take care of everyone around you. She loves that you're dependable and responsible and boring." I finished for him. "Don't forget boring. The kind of boring that makes a woman look elsewhere for excitement, for passion, for the thrill of forbidden attraction." David's face went ashen as he realized what he had just revealed. In trying to defend Jessica, he had listed exactly the qualities that would drive someone to seek adventure outside their relationship. More damaging still, he had spoken about Jessica's feelings with the intimate knowledge of someone who had discussed them at length, someone who knew her thoughts and desires from personal conversation. "That's not what I meant," David stammered, but the damage was already done. "Of course it is," I said gently, almost kindly. "It's exactly what you meant, because it's exactly what she's told you during all those private conversations you've been having. The conversations that happen when she's supposedly at yoga class, or when you're allegedly helping her plan wedding. Details, the silence that followed was deafening. Even the servers had stopped moving, frozen in place like actors who had forgotten their lines. My mother's handkerchief had fallen from her nerveless fingers, and she was staring at David with an expression of dawning horror. Jessica made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Marcus, you're misunderstanding everything. David and I are just friends. We've been planning your bachelor party, coordinating family arrangements. Of course we've talked privately. About wedding details. Have you? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, holding it up so she could see the screen. Then you won't mind if I call you right now, will you? Just to see if your phone is in your purse, or if it's somewhere else entirely. The look of absolute terror that crossed Jessica's face told me everything I needed to know. In my original timeline, I had never thought to check her phone, never suspected that the device she claimed to guard so carefully for privacy reasons was actually a direct line to my brother. But death had taught me that trust without verification was just willful blindness dressed up as virtue. Go ahead, I said, my finger hovering over her contact information. Let's see where your phone is right now. Don't? David said suddenly, his voice cracking with strain. Marcus, don't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Why not here? I asked, genuinely curious. If there's nothing to hide, why does the location matter? Unless, of course, there is something to hide and you're more worried about. Public humiliation than private honesty. My father stepped forward then, his businessman's instincts finally overriding his parental shock. That's enough. All of you. We're going inside to discuss this privately, like civilized people. Are we civilized, Dad? I asked, noting how the evening breeze had picked up, rustling the string lights and carrying the scent of jasmine from my mother's garden. Because it seems to me that civilized people tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Civilized people don't sneak around behind each other's backs, lying and scheming and pretending that betrayal is actually love. Marcus, please. My mother spoke for the first time, her voice breaking with emotion. Think about what you're doing. Think about your future, about the family's reputation. I am thinking about it, Mom, I said, and for the first time all evening, my voice softened with genuine affection. I'm thinking about how much damage we do to ourselves when we prioritize reputation over reality, when we choose comfortable lies over difficult truths. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, seeing everything from shock to curiosity to barely concealed excitement at the drama unfolding before them. These were people who had known me since childhood, who had watched me grow up, who thought they understood exactly who Marcus Chen was and what he represented. Here's what I want everyone to understand, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the evening air. I'm not canceling this engagement because I'm having cold feet or because I'm afraid of commitment. I'm canceling it because I've finally learned the difference between loving someone and being in love with the idea of someone. Jessica made a sound that was half sob, half gasp, her careful composure finally cracking completely. Marcus, you can't mean this. We're getting married in 5 days. The church is booked, the flowers are ordered, the guests have already made travel arrangements. All of that can be canceled, I said matter-of-factly. Money can be refunded, apologies can be made, explanations can be given. What can't be undone is a marriage built on lies and sustained by willful ignorance. But what about love? Jessica asked, tears streaming down her face now, her mascara creating dark tracks against her pale cheeks. What about everything we've built together? What have we built together, Jessica? I asked. And there was no cruelty in the question, only genuine curiosity. A shared apartment where we live parallel lives, social calendar full of events where we perform happiness for other people, a relationship where we've both settled for compatibility instead of holding out for genuine connection. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Guess the truth was, we hadn't built anything together except the illusion of a life that looked good from the outside, but felt empty from within. David stepped forward then, his face flushed with anger. In desperation? Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. Jessica and I have feelings for each other. Real feelings? The kind of feelings that you've never had for her and she's never had for you. The honesty was so sudden, so unexpected, that even I was caught off guard by it. David had always been the charming one, the smooth talker who could navigate any social situation with ease. But standing there in front of 200 people with his world collapsing around him, he had chosen raw truth over careful manipulation. We tried to ignore it, he continued, his voice gaining strength as he committed to full disclosure. We tried to be honorable, to respect your relationship, to keep our distance. But love doesn't follow rules, Marcus. Doesn't care about timing, or propriety, or family harmony. Love, I repeated, tasting the word like wine that might have turned to vinegar. Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back? Is that what you call lying to my face every day for months? Is that what you call planning to let me marry a woman whose heart belongs to someone else? We never planned for you to find. Out, Jessica said, her voice barely audible. We thought we could control it, manage it, find a way to make everyone happy. By letting me live a lie for the rest of my life, I asked. By building my future on a foundation of your deception? How exactly would that have made me happy, Jessica? She had no answer for that, because there was no good answer. The plan had been simple and selfish. Take what they wanted while letting me believe I had what I wanted. Never mind that what I thought I wanted was based entirely on false information. You're right, I said, looking back and forth between them. You're absolutely right that love doesn't follow rules. Real love is honest, even when honesty is painful. Real love respects the people it might hurt, even when that respect is inconvenient. Real love doesn't hide in shadows and feed on lies. I pulled the engagement ring from my pocket, the jade stone catching the light from the string lights overhead. My grandmother's ring passed down through 3 generations of Chen family women, each of whom had worn it as a symbol of genuine commitment and lasting love. This ring deserves better than what we were offering it, I said, holding it up so everyone could see. It deserves to be worn by someone whose love is real, whose commitment is honest, whose future is built on truth instead of convenience. I walked over to Jessica and gently took her left hand. Sliding the ring from her finger with the careful respect one might show a sacred object, she didn't resist, perhaps understanding finally that there was no argument left to make, no performance left to give. I'm giving you both exactly what you want, I said, stepping back so that David and Jessica stood together while I stood alone. Each other. No more sneaking around, no more lies, no more guilt. You can have the grand love affair you've been conducting in secret, except now it won't be secret anymore. The relief that washed over both their faces was unmistakable, even mixed as it was with shame and embarrassment. They had gotten what they wanted, just not in the way they had planned. But understand this, I continued, my voice taking on an edge that made both of them step backward. You got your happiness by stealing it from me. You built your love story on the wreckage of my trust. And that means you'll have to live with the knowledge that your foundation is poisoned. That your beginning was someone else's ending. I turned to address the crowd one final time, noting how many of them were openly staring now, no longer even pretending to look away from the drama. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption of what was supposed to be a celebration. But sometimes the most important celebrations are the ones where we celebrate our escape from the wrong life, before it's too late to find the right one. And with that, I walked away from my engagement party, my family, my old life, and toward the future I had died once to discover. 6 months later, I stood in the main gallery of Vista Dreams, Elena's art exhibition in Sausalito, watching her explain one of her paintings to a collector who couldn't seem to decide between 2 pieces for his penthouse. She wore a flowing, burgundy dress that moved like water when she gestured, her hair loose around her shoulders in the way I had come to love. When she laughed at something the collector said, the sound carried across the gallery like music, drawing smiles from everyone within earshot. The painting they were discussing was one of her newer works, created during what she jokingly called her liberation period. It showed a figure breaking free from chains made of golden light. Beautiful but restrictive, reaching toward a horizon painted in shades of possibility. She had told me it represented the moment she realized that freedom was more valuable than security, truth more precious than comfort. She's remarkable, isn't she? The voice belonged to Sophie Martinez, Elena's best friend, who had appeared beside me with 2 glasses of wine and a knowing smile. Never seen her this happy. Whatever you did to convince her to give you a chance, it was the right approach. I told her the truth, I said, accepting the wine gratefully. Turns out that was revolutionary enough. Sophie laughed, but her expression grew more serious as she studied my face. You know, when Elena first told me you had called off your engagement to pursue her, I thought you were either incredibly brave or completely insane. Rich men don't usually walk away from convenient marriages to chase uncertain love. Maybe I'm both, I admitted. But I'd rather be insane and authentic. then sane and empty. The truth was, the past 6 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of either timeline. Walking away from the engagement had meant walking away from my position at Chen Industries, at least temporarily. My father had been furious beyond measure, not just at the public humiliation, but at what he saw as my abandonment of family duty and social responsibility. My mother had been heartbroken, unable to understand how her stable, reliable eldest son had suddenly become someone she didn't recognize. The scandal had been immediate and merciless. San Francisco's social circles thrived on exactly this kind of drama. And the story of the Chen heir who had publicly humiliated his fiancée and brother had provided weeks of delicious gossip for charity luncheons and country club gatherings. Some called it romantic, others called it cruel, but everyone had an opinion about Marcus Chen's spectacular implosion. David and Jessica had married in a small private ceremony just 2 months. After my dramatic exit, no family celebration, no grand reception, just a quiet acknowledgement of what everyone now knew had been inevitable. They seemed happy enough, according to mutual acquaintances. Though I suspected their relationship would always carry the shadow of how it had begun, love built on betrayal had a way of breeding insecurity, and neither of them would ever be entirely sure the other wouldn't stray again when temptation presented itself. Elena had been cautious at first, understandably wary of being seen as the rebound relationship or the reason for my broken engagement. She had insisted on taking things slowly, on building something real rather than rushing into another potentially damaging situation. We'd spent months talking, really talking, about everything from our childhood dreams to our adult disappointments, our fears about love and our hopes for the future. The first time she had kissed me, 3 months after the engagement party disaster, it had felt like coming home to a place I had never known existed.
Ow.
There was nothing performed about it, nothing calculated or strategic. Just two people who had found each other at exactly the moment they were both ready to be found. Marcus Elena's voice pulled me back to the present as she approached with the collector in tow. "I'd like you to meet Harrison Webb. He's considering commissioning a piece for his new office building downtown." "Mr. Chen," Webb said, extending a hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to being important. "Elena tells me you have an excellent eye for art. I was hoping you might help me choose between these two pieces." I glanced at Elena, noting the way her eyes sparkled with amusement. She knew that I had no particular expertise in art beyond an appreciation for her talent, but she enjoyed watching me navigate these social situations with the same people who had once whispered about my spectacular fall from grace. "Mr. Webb," I said, shaking his hand firmly, "the beautiful thing about art is that it chooses you as much as you choose it. Which piece makes you feel something you can't quite name?" Webb considered this, looking back and forth between the two paintings with renewed attention. "Well, when you put it that way, I suppose it's this one," he said, pointing to a canvas that showed two figures walking toward a sunset, their shadows intertwined on the path behind them. "Excellent choice," Elena said, her smile radiant with genuine pleasure. "That one is called New Beginnings. It's about the courage to start over when you realize you've been living the wrong story." As Webb made arrangements to purchase the painting, Elena slipped her hand into mine, her fingers warm and familiar. "Thank you for that," she whispered. "He's been agonizing over the decision for 20 minutes. "I just told him the truth," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes that's all people need to hear." The gallery was beginning to thin out as the evening wound down. Collectors and art enthusiasts drifting toward the reception area where champagne and small appetizers waited. Elena's exhibition had been a tremendous success, with more than half the pieces sold and several commissions arranged for future work. "Elena," I said as we found ourselves alone near her favorite painting, the one she had told me she would never sell because it represented too much personal transformation, "there's something I want to ask you." She turned to face me fully, her expression curious but unguarded. "What is it?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, noting how her eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been hope. 6 months ago, I thought I understood what marriage meant. I thought it was about finding someone who fit into the life I had already planned, someone who would play the role I needed them to play. she whispered, her free hand coming up to touch her throat in a gesture of unconscious vulnerability. But you taught me that real partnership isn't about fitting into someone else's life. I continued, opening the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the gallery lights like captured starfire. It's about building a new life together, something that belongs to both of you and neither of you at the same time. Tears had begun to form in Elena's eyes, but she was smiling, really smiling, in a way that transformed her entire face. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Elena Rodriguez, I said, dropping to one knee in the middle of her art gallery, surrounded by paintings that celebrated transformation and new beginnings. Will you marry me? It's not because it makes sense, or because it's expected, or because it's the next logical step, but because I can't imagine building any future that doesn't have you at the center of it. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time as I slipped the ring onto her finger. Yes, of course, yes. As I stood and kissed her, surrounded by her art and her dreams and the life she had built from courage and authenticity, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. Death had been a terrible teacher, but an effective one. It had shown me the difference between existing and living. Between going through the motions and actually feeling the music. David and Jessica had gotten exactly what they thought they had wanted, each other, without interference or obstacle. But in pursuing stolen love, they had missed the opportunity for the kind of partnership that Elena and I were building, a kind that grew stronger because it was chosen freely rather than taken secretly. The irony was perfect. In letting my brother steal my fiancée, I had gained something infinitely more valuable. I had found the woman who was actually meant to be my wife, the life that was actually meant to be mine, and the future that was actually worth living. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and sometimes the greatest victory comes from losing gracefully, and then discovering that what you thought you were losing was never actually yours to begin with. Elena and I walked out of the gallery hand in hand, ready to build something real. Together, while somewhere across the city, David and Jessica were probably still trying to convince themselves that love based on lies could somehow transform into something genuine and lasting. But that was their story to live. Mine was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.